We want to start the event. We want to thank everybody, whether you're tuning in or in the building. If you're around the corner, you can come through. It's nothing like being here live. Otherwise, you can be on the web and check us out. Let folks know it's free to get on and to have access. So I would like to bring up our pastor, Pastor Beckley, to have words and start things however he wants to start things. I want him to know I appreciate him because he was one of my first calls. I was just saying when we started Racial and Economic Justice, talking about what we wanted to do and hearing our heart, and he has been an incredible help. So let's start with Pastor Beckley. Let's give him a hand. Come on, Pastor.
Well, praise God. Welcome. Good morning to all of you. We are so honored. I'm just so excited to partner with Joe and their law firm, and I love the vision they have about making sure that folks who may not have access to legal information can have it in a context where they can at least get some questions answered, and if they do want to get further legal assistance after they get their questions answered, that's available to them as well. And so it's just a real exciting opportunity for our community, for our culture, for the church body to be able to have this kind of access and this kind of information on a periodical basis. You know, we plan to do this at least a couple of more times before this year, at least once or twice this year, and we plan to spread it around to some of the other churches in our community so that others in other community can be exposed to this, because we realize there's a need. There's a need. I was telling Joe when we first started this partnership, how many times we sat in our church in meetings and said, I wish we could just ask an attorney this question. Just want to know from a legal perspective. And then thinking, well, we don't have no consultation fee, and so we just figure this out on our own. And so to be able to have this opportunity in this kind of forum to be able to hear, first of all, presentations from a legal perspective on different topics, and then to be able to do a Q&A and ask some questions is really a blessing. And so we're excited about what's happening. I'm not going to prolong our time any longer. I'm going to pray for us. Is that okay? Hallelujah. And then we're going to get in and hearing these men and women who have this expertise and knowledge share some things with us, and also hopefully be able to answer some of the questions you may have in your heart today. Father, we again thank you and praise you for this opportunity to be in this clinic, in this forum today, and deal with these issues that are before us. Thank you for Joe. Thank you for this law firm. Thank you for the work they do. We thank you for the vision they have, and we thank you for the heart they have to share their knowledge, to share their expertise with our community. We pray today that many will be blessed, will be encouraged, and we pray that many will get their questions answered. And Lord, and we also pray if they need further legal assistance, that they will not hesitate to take advantage of what you have provided for them today. Bless these attorneys as they share. Bless this time as we interact. We thank you for this opportunity to gain this knowledge. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much, Pastor Beckley. Appreciate you, sir. Thank you. I want to shout out a couple folks really fast, and I'm going to get into, first of all, you're standing in the church environment, but you don't get to preach. So I'm kind of reminding myself of that. Jerry, go, if you need to. The first person I want to point out is Jerry Musgrove. Jerry is career at Patton, even though he wants you to know he's retiring in December. Okay, that's real big. After 33 years, 33, okay. But Jerry was one of my first calls when we started the department, and I gave him my heart about what we wanted to do, and he was helping us connect the dots. When you're researching in the law, you know that you got the right place when you start getting the same cases. That means you're towards the end, okay, of your search. So when I'm talking to Pastor Beckley and he's saying, talk to Sam Casey and talk to this person and then I talk to Jerry and Jerry says, talk to this person and they're saying the same people, then I know that I'm getting it to a head. So thank you for your support, always from the beginning, continuing and being here now. I thank you and I appreciate you for that. I want you guys to meet the folks that help us, our team. My paralegal is here. Her name is Roxanne. Roxanne, I stole from the last law firm I was at. No offense for those of you that are watching, but we've had some conversations and hearing her heart and it's easy, frankly, it's easy to sell purpose. And so often you'll see her on my emails when I am emailing someone, and she helps bring things to a head. She tells me where to stand. That's really important, and that's what we really need in terms of what we're doing, trying to ramp up the department, okay? And so that's important. The speakers that you'll see a little bit later today, you'll see Dora Barillo, who is our public health officer. You're getting ready to learn how legal connects to public health. If health is an equity issue and law is an equity issue where we're looking for equity, then legal and health actually connect together. And that's what we'll be talking about a little bit more today. Kimberly Lewis runs our organization, Pro Se Legal, which is a separate organization, but still goes along the same way. They're going to find the middle ground, just start to get this vision, just like you call your primary health professional for anything you think you might need and you expect them to direct you. Pro Se is going to do the same thing for us. Okay, so that's where we're going. We're basically taking the model and spinning it on its head. Okay, you'll see Derek Smith a little bit later. He is very high up in the public defender's department. There's a song that says South Central does it like nobody does. Me and him are both from South Central. We met at Redlands, and I always knew he wanted to be a criminal lawyer, and he's a very good one. And so he'll be talking to us a little bit later. So here's what I thought I would do: give you very quick information about how the department came together, and then give you some information on employment issues related to COVID. And there are three main questions that most people want to know. They want to know whether or not they can be forced to have a vaccination, whether or not they can get an accommodation that keeps them from going in if they have concerns about that, either because of how the environment is at work or either because they've got family that may be sick. I've got a family member who's in this situation, who's teaches in the schools, scared to go back into that environment just because of the sick family member. Okay, so we'll be talking about a little bit of that. All right, so how the department came together. This is part of the larger vision of the firm, McCune Wright, that wants to do everything for the consumer, just like you see very big law firms that deal with everything for the corporation. Okay, we want to deal with everything for the consumer. Okay, so there already is a personal injury department that Corey Weck heads. There's already an appellate department. There's already a business litigation department. We do everything typically on the plaintiff side. For my department, the exception is there's some people that I represent in pre-litigation, and if something becomes a litigated matter, some businesses, some African American, some Black-owned businesses, and that kind of thing, I will help them the best way that I can and help get them over. So racial and economic justice started because we wanted to do something more direct, and we wanted the help to people with income and wealth disparity, particularly people of color, to be more direct and not incidental. So it certainly helped this community when we hit Wells Fargo for $203 million for check overdraft fees. Okay, they put it in a certain order, right? I mean, let's keep it real. Like, okay, so everybody that's never owed any money, never had a tight budget, don't listen for the next 20 seconds. But for the rest of us, you go out, take a cigarette, but no, they can't smoke on this campus. But, you know, when you have $200 in the bank and you got 3 checks and the first 2 will clear, but the third one you're not quite sure, or whatever else. Well, what Wells Fargo did all that time ago, and they're not going to sue me for defamation, but it would be put in a different order where all 3 would have a problem, okay? There was a big lawsuit related to that. We've innovated that. The firm also did unintended motor vehicle acceleration. The only time I ever had a problem with Toyota, they had unintended vehicle motor acceleration. There was a non-analog message getting to the gas and making it not stop. And they did that, as well as a whole lot of product liability. So when they came to us, they wanted to do something more direct. And so that's how racial and economic justice started. And as a practical matter, we do a few things. We advocate. We're able to actually connect the dots and advocate on issues, okay, that connect to our potential constituency. We meet with churches church pastors on a quarterly basis, okay? And we do a newsletter. We actually have a copy of the newsletter here for those pastors. Some of them we've actually done legal work for as well. And the third thing is litigation. We think litigation is nuclear. In other words, it's kind of like the nuclear bomb. Sometimes everybody gets hurt, and it may or may not help the client ultimately, but if you don't have any choice, you do what you need to do because it can help, and we think that we're good enough at it where we can make it count. But just like with the nuclear thing, when you know everybody can do that, most of the time it brings you towards some type of resolution. And we actually want to be part of creating We hope that after we do 1 or 2 cases in a certain area, that the other people that could potentially be our defendants will come to the table and say, we want to make sure we do this right. And that's what we would rather do, because that's your predictable result. Anything can happen in trial. You do it enough, you'll win some, you ought to lose, you'll lose some, you ought to win, and you don't want to be on the losing end of that. So we'll try it if we need to. We feel very confident about how we are with 12 people. I really believe that once I do closing argument, the jury, if they don't find for me, it won't be because that they didn't want to, it won't be because they didn't want to. But that being said, I'd rather get you a predictable result, all right? So let me give you a couple things very quickly on a couple of the employment issues that we're seeing. Okay, so I'll put these in a couple categories. Gateway issues at the beginning of the employment, things while at work, and then the things that affect or motivate the end of the employment and the terms of the employment. All right, so by the way, let me thank as well, not only our marketing department, Sammy, Ricky, I thank you guys. Devin was here before. It's great having a whole marketing team, but the whole ECF team, the Ecclesia team from the very beginning. I know Nicole's on vacation. Hopefully she's not watching this, because that means she's really on vacation. But Nicole and everybody else, I mean, they were really fantastic and super professional. So I want to shout them out and thank them. Okay, so, the big question with COVID is how much it really changes. And it does change some things, but it doesn't change everything. Okay, but it is important to ask the question and then get the answer related that way. And I will preface this by saying that the thing that's frustrating about COVID is that we like certainty in the law. We tend to say, okay, here's a set of facts. Let's apply it to the law. Here's what the law is. Here's what we normally do. Here's the precedent. Well, we don't have a precedent for dealing with a national pandemic unless you go back 103 years. So there's so much that has changed since then. We're in new territory. So sometimes the answer to the question is we don't know. Okay? As much certainty as we want, sometimes the answer is we don't know. Okay? But anyway, so there's some new laws on the books. The governor's been very active. The state legislature has been very active. And there are several things that have happened since COVID started that affect some circumstances related to the workplace, okay? So first of all, there's a law, it's AB 685, you don't really need to know the number, but what it does is it forces the employer to let the employees know of a possible exposure. It also forces the employees to let employers to let an employee know. You have to actually let local organizations know, like your local agency here, it'd probably be the San Bernardino County Department of Health, of an outbreak. An outbreak is defined as 3 people at the workplace that have a clinically confirmed COVID-19 diagnosis, and they're from different households. Okay? 3 people, same workplace, clinically not, I think I have COVID, I've got a cough, no. Clinically confirmed in separate households. That is called an outbreak. You are supposed to be notified as there's an outbreak at the place, okay, at where you're working. All right. You also have to, related to that, they have to provide written notice that includes information about the benefits that are available, anti-discrimination and retaliation regulations, as well as the employer's disinfection and safety plan. So that means there has to be a disinfection and safety plan. So they've got to let you know about those things. And by the way, a facility can be ordered closed if it's deemed unsafe, or it can be issued what they call serious violation citations, and they can do that without notice or without an opportunity to respond. So there's actuality and there's perception. So what I'm saying is employers, places, people that own establishments, you can lose on the perception here because the state can come in and shut you down based on what they think. And you don't have an opportunity to respond. Now, if you're on the wrong side of that, well, I guess I can't fault them, but imagine having your business closed. So you really have to be, frankly, very loud about all of the things that you are doing to keep your place safe. You got to be very loud about that. All right. So here's another thing, and some things you never think about, right? When you get injured at work, okay, our system is called workers' compensation. It is a no-fault system. In other words, it doesn't matter whose fault it is, but that's where your coverage comes from. For a long time, there's been a question as to whether or not if I get sick from the office, if I get COVID from the office, whether or not it's going to be workers' comp. At the beginning of COVID, the only workers' comp presumption there was, in other words, that there would be a presumption that your injury was work-connected, was as to first responders and actually agricultural workers. That was your first ones, okay? Now, there can be a presumption for an outbreak, 5 employees or more at the workplace that are diagnosed during the outbreak. So there will be a presumption if 5 of you at work got sick, okay, and I presume that's from different households as well, there's going to be a presumption that it is workers' comp connected. Because sometimes people say, okay, I got hurt, what does it go under, right? So there's going to be a workers' comp presumption if several of you, if 5 of you get sick. That's important to remember. Also, for companies that are 500 or more, and that means nationwide. So if I'm working at a store that's a national chain, for instance, and there's enough to get to the 500 number, you are entitled to supplemental paid sick leave, okay? Now, I was getting ready to say that this is outdated because what the rule talks about is that you get the supplemental paid sick leave, employees of covered employers 500 or more, if they're subject to quarantine or isolation order. Well, we thought that was foreign a month and a half ago, right? And then we had people, as we will talk more, that did not get vaccinated. So that's why you've got, governors and people in different places that weren't talking so much about people being vaccinated, talking about people being vaccinated now. So we're not necessarily out of the woods, and I think that's one of the things that needs to come through today, all right? Somebody that's subject to quarantine or isolation, somebody that's advised to self-quarantine or self-isolate, or somebody that's prohibited from working by the employer due to health concerns related to potential transmission. Anybody in that box can get supplemental paid sick leave, all right? So it's, and some of these things your employer is obligated to let you know about, okay? Also, hospital workers, if you've got family members working at the hospital, or whatever else, or if you go to the hospital and you're looking around, okay? Under SB 275, employers of hospital workers have to provide certain employees with PPP, and they have to have a 3-month stockpile. And you remember, a 3-month stockpile. In other words, they got to have enough to deal with it for a while, all right? That's important. And they also have to provide inventory info to Cal OSHA. So if you are in that space or that universe somehow, or someone that is, or you're going to get care, there's a lot of people that didn't go to the doctor because they were concerned about what the setup would be, and that type of thing. There's certain things that they're supposed to do. All right. So let's talk about. Let me go into this area. Accommodation. A lot of people have heard about accommodation and how they deal with that and asking for an accommodation. In other words, I need an allowance to work under circumstances that are a little bit different than what I normally work under because I have a disability or I have something that weighs in on me physically or otherwise that keeps me from doing, hey, how are you? That keeps me from doing my work under the circumstances that people normally do, okay? The first thing that I will say, and this is something that we looked into, and we'll see how much or how little it changes. For those that have ever dealt with somebody that's asking for accommodation, what happens is you ask for an accommodation, and then they do what's called a good faith interactive process. There'll be discussion about what you need from an accommodation standpoint, and then whether or not the employer can actually provide it without an undue burden or undue hardship. I don't make sure I get the legal terminology right. And sometimes, depending on the resources of the employer and the circumstance, what you're asking for might not be unreasonable, but your employer might not be in the position to provide it. Just in case folks weren't sure, to this point, working from home has not been considered a good accommodation, okay? Most of the time, the law has not said that that's been a good accommodation because as a general statement, Most people thought you were more focused when you were at the job, when you were on the job. Okay? Now, we'll see how much or how little that changes. But to this point, historically, that has not been a good accommodation. That has not been a preferred accommodation or a required one. Okay? So remember that. All right. And connected to that, I've had some questions come through and I want to answer them as much as I can. And I'll look at my text as well, because as people are asking questions that are streaming live, they actually, we may be able to actually answer some of them. There has been no right to accommodation. By the way, this is one of the big questions I'm getting right now. If you're asking related to COVID, you do not have a right to an accommodation because you have a sick family member at home with you. You don't have a legal right to it. Okay? Sounds unfair, etc. I would imagine that might be reconsidered. Some people are going to sue related to it. Some people are going to go back and forth related to it. But as of now, it's fluid. It can be fluid. As of now, there is no right to accommodate you because you have a sick family member. Now, that does not mean that you shouldn't try to undertake the good faith interactive process, particularly if your employer values you as a worker and there is an opportunity for you to be able to do your work from home. Okay? That doesn't mean that you shouldn't go for it. All right? And you know, you in church, you believe the favor of God might be on you. I'm not telling you not to go for it. I'm just telling you that under the law, you don't necessarily have that right. Okay? Related to that, you do not have a right to be accommodated because you don't want to get vaccinated. It might be some bad news for people. Sorry, you don't have that right. And there are people that I have talked to, people that came up in church, people that in church, people in church leadership that still don't want to get vaccinated. Okay? You do not have a right to be accommodated because you don't want to become vaccinated. Now, as we will talk more about this today, I think that if you didn't know that the thing to do is to get vaccinated, you ought to know now. 99% of the people that have died recently were people that did not get vaccinated. You get vaccinated, it almost guarantees you that you will not die from getting COVID. Not that you won't get it, but that you won't die from it. Okay? Facts are facts. But there are some people that have a health concern, a legitimate health concern related to that. I'm not really talking to them quite the same way. And there are people out there, I know some people in different categories, where it was a health concern because of some pre-existing and that type of thing. But we're still, some of us still in the place, we're scared because of the Tuskegee experiment and all this other stuff. We have to get past that. Okay? I mean, I'm just saying. Okay, particularly in our community. All right? But you don't have a right to be accommodated because you're scared to get the vaccination. All right? So, I already said that generally speaking, staying home hasn't been considered a preferred accommodation. Even though, let me go here, it's not set in stone, but the EEOC guidance, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission guidance, early guidance, is that an employer can require an employee to get vaccinated. That is the early guidance. It's not set in stone yet. And if it's not being litigated, I didn't see it as of yesterday, the day before, it will be. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. A fourth grade teacher used to say, you can bet your sweet bippy. Miss Hudson, Lord have mercy, we just terrorized that woman. That was terrible. I'm sorry about that. But the EEOC initial ruling is that you can be required to get your vaccination. So we are leaning toward there being requirements in that regard, okay? Even though it's not set in stone, even though I expect it to continue to be litigated. All right, so I wanted to mention those things. Quickly, I will say this, and I want to take a couple questions for people that want to mention something. In our world, what I do, I deal with a lot of employment stuff. I deal with a lot of civil rights. I just settled a civil rights case where a woman, not that she had to be a super educated black woman or whatever else, goes in the store to bring back a bug-infested table. She'll go to a store. She went to a store everybody knows that will remain nameless. and tried to bring it back, and they wouldn't take it back, tried to give her $11 for it. She paid $200. And she was direct, but she was respectful, and they called the police on her. Didn't say that, and told the police that she was belligerent and refused to leave, which were all blatant lies, okay? Now, we know when you call the police on black folks everywhere, you're putting their lives in danger, potentially, depending if they have a bad day. Now, it shouldn't happen that way, but let's not act like it hasn't. It's never happened. And sure enough, there was a little bit of a thing where she was reaching for a card and one of the police grabbed her, all right? And so based on a lie, all right? So the long and the short of it is we filed a civil rights case because it was the kind of case we needed to file. And we settled it because she wanted to move on. But to this day, her kids don't want to stop at that store, okay? So that's a civil rights case. I deal with a lot in the employment context. A few things. Wage and hour. You're not getting paid what you're supposed to. You're supposed to get paid $15 an hour. They don't pay you what you're supposed to. You don't get your breaks, your meal breaks, your rest breaks. You don't get your overtime. Okay, so that's wage and hour. Discrimination based on any protected classification. If you you asked for workers' comp and they were mad and you got back and they fired you. Stupid happens all the time. All the time. I had somebody got fired the day they got back from taking a protected leave. Okay? Race. Okay? Not always easy to prove, but there. Race, disability, religion could be. Any of a number of grounds, discrimination. So, wage and hour, discrimination, public policy. You make a complaint about something that you think is illegal. Might be you not getting your wages. Might be you not getting your breaks. And then there's some kind of adverse action, whether it's someone being sued or whatever else. I've had some people that I'm representing that are in the mandated reporting context, and they report some things, and community care licensing comes out, and then they find themselves fired. Stuff that doesn't make sense. Okay, and so all of those things now have attorney's fee exposure. By that I mean, on top of whatever we're trying to recover, the law allows for attorney's fees to be paid. Often that's the case that we're going to bring because that's the case that has the potential, frankly, to pay for itself, because we do every case on a contingency fee basis. I'm not going to ask for money ahead of time. If I take you on an hourly, it's going to be because you're a business person and a different thing. It's a little bit of an exception to our own rule. But most of those cases are going to be attorney's fee cases, contingency fee cases, personal injury cases that we take. Attorney's fee, contingency fee cases. If we don't win anything for you, you're not paying anything. We eat what we kill. But I'm going to ask you questions about the timeline, about what happens from here to here to here happens all the way. You should not have to be in a position where you have to remember in excruciating detail and have it all written out, all the things that happened to you. But it helps me. So if you're scared, if you're concerned about something, whether you send yourself emails, whether you write notes, whatever it is that you do, because if it's a he said, she said situation, the other side will take advantage of the fact that it's a he said, she said situation. And we may lose if we don't have that. A lot of times, things that are being done are morally wrong. I don't necessarily know whether it's going to follow if they're legally wrong. That's why I'm asking for information. And by the way, I'm a discerning person, and I'm a discerning Christian even at that, which you guys really understand. If I don't think I'm buying it, I know I can't sell it. So every time my spidey senses tingle and I take a case, regardless of that, I have always regretted it. I've never seen it fail. And at the same time, there are some cases that I may take because they're the right things to do. I get right away that it's a case that I need to take, and that's what we do. That the one I just described to you was in that category, okay? So we are not scared, or for others scared, to take a case if it's the right one, all right? But I interviewed Carl Douglas of the O.J. Simpson defense team not too long ago. And one of the things he said is that, and I have the same problem, he said he suffers from terminal honesty. So he's going to tell you what he thinks. the whole time. And you guys are cool, folks are cool with that as long as they're telling you what you want to hear. Looks like you got a good case or whatever else, then your deposition happens where stuff comes up and we've been representing you for a year and you didn't tell us. It just looks bad, And we have to come off a certain way with these juries. Sometimes with the jury, understanding the jury has to make an exception for its own rule. They don't like giving out money to people. You telling them in a personal injury case that your back hurts, they're sitting on a hard bench, their back hurts too. That doesn't mean they need to write you a check. Okay? So I have to believe in the case, not that it has to be perfect, but I inherit as an attorney whatever you've done or haven't done. It is wonderful when people can just send me a timeline, scripture, chapter, and verse, and I have a place and a jumping off point. I will also say this. I'm not telling you not to bring your own DFEH claim. I'm not telling you not to bring your own wage claim with the labor board, DLSC, because you can go that route as well. But what I am telling you is that depending on how you did it, it may make me less likely to take your case. So if you can talk to the likes of me or whoever may be out there at the beginning before you file, we might be in a little bit better position, okay? That's not absolute. I'm not telling people not to fight for themselves or whatever else, but you might be in the middle of the wilderness and I may have told you to go in a different direction to begin with. So when you do that with your eyes open. So if there's enough happening where you would actually not only take down information, but write out your own complaint, if there's enough happening that way, talk to somebody before you do it. I'm just saying, because a lot of people, I've seen people get in litigation and they're representing themselves and they are down the road. They've been in litigation for a year and they're calling me and they're telling me they have $1 million case. And I'm saying, well, if it's all of that and a bag of chips and expensive ice cream, why didn't you call me a year ago? Because I may have done something a little bit different. And it might mean, as determined as you may be, and that's a good thing, it also might mean that I might have some client control issues because you think you already know what's supposed to be going on because you've been doing it to that point, and now you need me. I don't want to have a personality conflict with you. We're supposed to be on the same team, all right? And so if my discernment is that you're a little bit too high maintenance, I will go ahead and let you finish it out. You started it out, I'm going to let you finish it. Hallelujah. The Bible said he's the author and the finisher of our faith, bringing it to maturity and perfection. So you go on and be God and bring it to maturity and perfection. But I'm going to leave it alone. Hallelujah. All right. So quickly, I want to give you a couple things on the eviction moratorium, even though we don't really do eviction. And I've got a great referral for you in that regard. I see my dear friend Linda Jackson here, and I thank you for being here. I had in my notes to tell people to call you. One of the things we're going to do is for everyone that went online and reserved an RSVP, we're going to send you a resource email. Every resource that we've mentioned here today will be in that email, okay? So Linda Jackson's information will be there. There have been, eviction moratorium has gotten extended out a couple times, is the long and the short of it. At first, it got extended out to, let's say, starting off, it was January, I believe, January 31st. And then it was June 30th. And now it's September 30th. Now, something should have been happening this whole time. You should have been in the position to do a declaration, a hardship declaration, saying that you were having issues related to COVID and that's why you weren't paying your rent. You should also either be paying or be prepared to pay 25% of your rent from during that period. Not that you had to pay it as you went, but by the end of the period, you're supposed to be able to have that together. And by the way, now there's been enough passed where up to 80% of your rent, if you qualify, could be being paid. There's a good starting place, and we'll send some resources to you, but a good starting place is if you live in San Bernardino, for instance, there is information on the San Bernardino website about this, about getting rent assistance. Okay, and even the plaintiff, landlord, who's coming against you after the period is over, has to actually pursue, almost on your behalf, the way that they're explaining it, has to actually pursue the rent assistance, which helps them and helps you because you owe them the money, but they have to check some boxes that way. They can't just sue you and have you be gone. So if you have no idea about that, look at your own local resources. look at our email. We'll get you some information about folks that you can talk to in that regard. So those are some things that we know that are going on that way, okay? I'm being brief, but I'm doing that on purpose, all right? Plaintiffs have to actively participate in the rental assistance program, okay? So statewide, it's a lot of money. There's a lot of money there, actually. And so you can be in a position, because the long and the short of it is, even if there's the 25% that you have to pay, the rest of it you have to come up with. It is not a permanent discount on rent, but you may be able to get the help to get the rent paid, the other portion of it. So those resources are really out there, and California is actually pretty good on this as they go. All right? So let me take a question or two really fast. Yes?
I'm very leery to recommend people.
Right.
It's, what your word is your bond, and
Yes, ma'am.
I've sent dozens of people to Linda's.
Yes.
She does a seminar.
Right.
But don't stop anymore.
Right.
I've never had one person that didn't call.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
Right.
For realtors that have been in the business for decades.
Right.
She's the best of the best.
Yes, Linda Jackson is at the Inland Empire Resource Center. She's here with us today, and she is somebody to be in contact with related to things that renters can find from a resource situation. And there's a larger thing. There's credit repair there. There are things that really help folks in our community, and I actually had her speak at our first event as well. And so we will make sure that her information is there so that you get in contact. One of the things I wanted to say at the beginning, and I'll say now, is we are really dedicated, this firm is, to the proposition that you do not have to be without information anymore. It's not going to be. The Bible says, our people destroy for lack of knowledge. You do not have to be in that situation anymore. You can find out now. Can't be that the information was not available. It is there, and there's enough of us in terms of who we're connecting with for us to get you empowered from an information standpoint. So I thank you for pointing that out. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
At the beginning, you mentioned on an outbreak.
Right.
Is there a timeline when that's supposed to be reported?
Oh,
And if it hasn't been reported, what can happen?
good question. I'll say two things about that. First of all, this law goes till 1/1/2023. So on the back end, that's not responsive to your question, but this law is going to go for a while. But actually, the things that the employer is supposed to do, they're actually supposed to do it within one business day, I believe. It's supposed to happen very quickly, very quickly. Now, that being said, here's another thing I want to say real fast. I've represented a couple employers, and I keep a couple of my employers that I help on pre-litigation things. I don't want you suing folk just because you can. Okay? If there's a good employer, I represented an employer once, a real good guy, who got in trouble because he knew that he needed to do a private ballot to go on a alternative work schedule. He did not know he had to file it with the state. It's an $80,000 mistake. Okay, and he had an employee in very much the no good deed goes unpunished category. You guys know how they are. The lady got let go twice and found an attorney that had that gotcha moment, and he filed the complaint. I would never have filed that complaint. So if you've got an employer, and you know where you stand with them, and they're fair with you, and they've stood with you, whatever else, don't make suing them your first option. Now, I think it's fine, particularly when your health has something to do with it, for you to point out that there's an issue. Okay? I think that's perfectly fine for you to do that. And if they know your heart, they're not going to take that the wrong way, I don't believe, at least. Because they wanted to get better, if you're saying it because you wanted to get better, as opposed to because you want to get them in trouble, and because you want, and there are people that are out there that'll get that gotcha moment and get paid off of it or whatever else. I've never been interested in that. The things that I tend to represent are egregious. That's what I'm looking for, things where folks do. I've got family where we talk about it all the time, and I joke with my daughter about it, where you were doing something you don't have any business doing, but we actually say you don't have no business doing. Those are the employers that I go after, the ones that are doing stuff they have no business doing, and they know they have no business doing it. That's the one I'm looking for. I'm not looking for gray area. So be careful about that, because we don't want employers not to employ. And most of these churches are employers as well, right? So a couple more questions.
Has seizures.
Mm-hmm.
Really bad seizures.
Okay.
Where he looks like he's been beat up after the seizure. The doctor says that he doesn't have enough seizures
Right.
to get Social Security.
So you need a Social Security disability lawyer, basically. And I've got one here in town,
Okay.
close by.
great. And one other question, please?
Yeah, sure.
An essential worker was receiving the COVID pay.
Right.
And then the COVID pay was taken away. Does the employer have the right to do that?
Does the employer have the right to take away the COVID pay? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, sure. It depends on the source of the COVID pay. So there's been a lot, and it's been quite a moving target, understanding whether it was federal or whether it was state. So it depends on the source. The source is going to dictate the circumstances, and that's going to dictate what they can and can't do. Now, remember, we were going to, in a lot of these areas, things were getting cut off right about now. Some things were, okay? And I'm talking very generally because I don't have the specifics on it. I don't mind telling you I don't have the specifics on it. But I try to pay attention to it every couple of weeks because it's so fluid in terms of the way that it's moved. So I would probably need more information about the source of the COVID pay, the circumstances related to that, and that type of thing. The more specific we can be, the better we can get towards getting an answer for you. Okay?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, a couple of years ago, Ecclesia had a program that I was part of where we went to the probation meetings
Sure.
for parolees. Now, those were cut off. And my question is, and I posted it, you might have it.
Okay.
An inmate being arrested in LA County.
Right.
And he paroles out.
Right, sure.
Does he have to stay in LA County or because his family's
Okay.
here in San Bernardino, can he stay out here?
I sent that question to our criminal law speaker, and he
Okay.
will be answering it
Cool.
for you. All right?
Okay, and also any other follow-up, so the follow-up will go through you, okay, I got that one.
Okay. You got the other one?
Well, yeah, the follow-up questions, and that's good, that's good.
Okay, great. Anybody else? So I want to make sure I keep the program moving. Linda, yeah.
Just a clarification.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yesterday,
Yes,
regarding the evictions.
yes, yes,
It's going to
good.
be an alternative
Right.
to evictions.
Yes,
The right word is, I think my assistant may, diversion.
right,
Okay, so the diversion means that there must be mediation.
right.
Mediation has to come into place where they're going to use a housing counselor, landlord, tenant, and mediation will
Right.
be there in order to make that happen. The rule is no longer 80%.
Okay,
Now,
gotcha.
the
Thank you for that.
landlord will be paid 100%.
Right, see?
So going forward, the model that we're using is one in Philadelphia, and I'll make sure I send you that tape so
Please
you
do.
can see
Yeah,
that it all works together because eviction is traumatizing to a family, financial,
Yes.
mental, just so many cases. Right now, because we've never, ever been here before,
yeah,
things are not going to work
Yeah.
like they traditionally did.
that's right, that's right.
So there are umbrellas to protect you tenants, to protect you landlords,
Right,
to make you whole again because of what is taking place. But
right.
I will say this, coming from yesterday, getting this information, you're really not going to see any of this taking place until next year.
Right, okay. Okay, that's excellent. Thank you so much for that. And that's straight from the heart of somebody that's dealing with it all day, every day. So I thank you for adding that for us. I want to get to the next speaker. I'm available, of course, to folks. We'll run our information, make sure people have it and get to us. I want to bring up Kimberly Lewis. Kimberly Lewis is a central piece of what allows us as an organization to have a ground floor of legal information. Where we're going is we are going to be able to provide information to folks on the ground floor where if they need a lawyer, fine. If they don't need a lawyer, fine. We want people to start getting in contact with legal services on a non-emergency basis. There are so many people that get in contact with us when it hits the fan, when somebody dies, when something happens, when there's a triggering traumatic event, and you're not only dealing with the trauma of the event, but the trauma with the fallout. So what we're trying to do, my dad used to always tell me something when I was little. When I asked for something, he said no. He said, you're looking to the corner, I'm looking around it. It took me years to get that. So what Pro Se helps us do is helps us to look around the corner, connect with legal services on a non-emergency basis, and help yourself the best way we can. Also, Kimberly we've got a truck, we've got a van out here where we can come and transact with you, and it is COVID friendly. It's got a big glass in the middle of it where we can actually come to you if we need to meet with you, sign up your case, whatever the case may be. All right, so Kim will tell you a little bit about herself, and she'll give you some information that's going to be really helpful. So come on up, Kimberly. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Joe. Can you guys hear me okay? I usually don't use a mic because I'm short and small, so I'm very loud. So my name's Kimberly Lewis. I am the supervising paralegal and manager of Pro Se Legal. We have 2 offices now in Ontario and the other one in Redlands. My background is I used to be the public relations director for Church of God / Church of God of Prophecy, which is a non-denominational multiracial church. My job was to get the church out into the community and to do community service needs. So I would do a pathway to citizenship classes. I am an immigration consultant. We would do food bank outreach programs or whatnot, and I really started listening to the community and where the disconnect was. And we'd get people like that would come into our food bank lines, and they'd have a packet of papers like yay big and say, I need help filling this out. I have no clue what any of this terminology is. I don't understand, where to even file this or anything else. My background legally is I am a paralegal. I am a degreed paralegal, have worked for attorneys for about 15 years before going out on my own. When I went out on my own, I had a very successful LDA or paralegal business in Riverside. Pro Se Legal actually plucked me and asked me to come on board with them to help them open up paralegal businesses. So what is non-lawyer legal? That's pretty much what we are. Not everybody needs an attorney for every single legal service. A lot of times, mom falls down a flight of stairs. She's now in rehab. They need a power of attorney. Who do they call? Someone like me. So then there we go for a flat rate fee, have the power of attorney signed and notarized. Family now goes on their way. Next thing, somebody has an uncontested divorce. Can't just get along anymore. COVID, drove everybody crazy, so you had divorces on an uptick. Unfortunately, most of those people are still living in the same house because they can't afford to move out or there's nothing to rent. So you're kind of a weird situation. But those kind of situations happen day in and day out. We had a gentleman, and I'm going to share 3 stories with you. We had a gentleman come in who did get a divorce. His divorce was finalized in April of this year. He wanted to set up an estate plan because we offer a lot of services, which I'll get into at the end. Our practice is to pull every single property deed prior to our client coming in. Number 1, to make sure that the proper person's on title. Number 2, to make sure that somebody is not fraudulently trying to transfer a property that does not belong to them. Those that work with fair housing and whatnot, especially in the public defender or the DA's office, know there's an uptick in fraud. So part of our practice is to pull the property deeds for all of our clients that are coming in when it entails family law, probate, estate planning, or just a regular deed process and a divorce. So gentleman comes in, wants to establish a living trust. We pull the deed. He says that his divorce was finalized in April. Guess what? Wife is still on title. So I ask him, your wife is still on title. Do you know that? He had no clue that his wife was still on title. So I go, well, in your divorce proceedings, did any of this come up? He had another paralegal outfit help him fill out the paperwork. Whoever filled that paperwork out for him did not disclose that there were community assets and community debt. Not only did they own a property together, a 30-year marriage, he was also a San Bernardino County employee, which means that he had a huge PERS retirement attached to that as well. So our office operates very different than most non-lawyer legal services. We like to take that client a step further, not just have them come in and say, that's great, you want me to do a trust for you, which I could have done, but it would have been improperly done. At the end, it would have been a disservice to him. So unfortunately, we had to send him to an attorney. Because we want to be a network of referral services for everybody, we were able to go ahead and refer him out to one of our family law attorneys that will help to wrinkle out that divorce that was improperly done. When he's done, he can come back to us and we'll do the estate planning for him. Another client, we had a lady call the office last week wanting us to go ahead and notarize on a will. Anybody who knows, in California, a will's not notarized. You have to have 2 witnesses in order to make it a valid will. So we kind of were a little questioning as to why would she need a will notarized. Well, she came in with a stack of papers that she had pulled off from prepaid legal. It was an intake form. She had no idea that what she had actually paid for and what she had brought to us was not even the actual documents. It just was an intake form. So we, of course, went ahead and helped her, explain that to her, showed her all of the issues that were there, drafted a will for her, and she proceeded with her surgery the next day. You know, that's why she wanted to go ahead and to create a will. So I bring back where I was the community outreach director for the church into this organization, and there's a disconnect. A lot of times people know what they need and they just don't know how to get it. Or they don't know what forms they need, or they don't know what court it needs to be filed in. If you're in Banning Beaumont, you have a probate. It's not filed in Riverside, it's filed in Palm Springs. You know, people just don't understand some of the proper procedures. So that's where we come in as non-lawyer legal. Another client came in to help us. She wanted us to help her finalize her father's probate. Okay, fine. So I asked her to bring in the probate documents. She didn't have the probate documents. Went ahead, got the case file, and we pulled the minute orders from court. The first probate was filed in 1994. It is now 2021, and the probate has still not been finalized. So we were reading through the minutes, and sure enough, the judge kept asking for the foreclosure documents to show that the property was in fact foreclosed and that there were no assets to distribute to the next of kin. Family had no clue where to get foreclosure documents. Obviously, Dad passed away in 1994. So with our relationship with title companies in the Inland Empire, we contacted them, asked them for the documents. They sent us the foreclosure documents. We went ahead and drafted everything, submitted it to the court for a very minimal fee. The case will be closed next month. But it's that very simple transaction to where a lot of times people attempt to do things on their own. A year into it, realize, oh my God, it was filed with the wrong court, or the court was asking for X, Y, and Z, or I just don't even know where to get the information that they're asking for. So we at Pro Se Legal want to be that missing link in the gap, I don't know how to say it, or that sponge in the middle of the gap, to where people who don't necessarily need an attorney can come to us to have the forms completed, to have them filed on their behalf, and to then extend the other hand. So let's say we had somebody come to us that unfortunately was in the process of an eviction. Well, maybe it was a warranted eviction or maybe not, but at least now I have a referral source that I can send this potential person to. Let's say I have an individual come to me and they're trying to fill out their wage claim form. So in the interview, I'm filling out the form on their behalf, and they start disclosing more and more information and tell me, oh, hey, I'm going to send 5 of my other friends, to you because they all work in the same warehouse. Now we have a referral and an attorney who we can go ahead and refer to. That there's probably a bigger issue than just the basic skipping lunch, not getting paid. So with that, I want to share some of the services that we have to offer at Pro Se Legal. Number one, as Joe had mentioned, we do offer mobile services. COVID, again, is on an uptick, and people just aren't comfortable coming into an office. So we have a very COVID-friendly mobile office where we're able to go ahead and to assist you or your family member. One of the keynotes is that a lot of our senior livings during COVID would not let individuals come in to go ahead and to see their family, but to even deal with day-to-day, work that needed to be done. As a notary, we were exempt from that, and we were able to go ahead and to go into senior living. However, I did have to have a COVID card to show that I was vaccinated before they'd actually let me in. But let's say that the facility had said, no, we're not comfortable having you come in. With our mobile van, the client then is able to come into the mobile van to where they're not exposed to COVID and go back to their senior living. So we offer mobile services on any service that we have to offer, which is uncontested divorces, complete probate packages from beginning to end, or as now you know, those that have issues in their self-represented probates can come to us and we'll help finalize those. Estate planning packages. You know, people are taking advantage right now of the low interest rates. They're refining their properties, and some people actually have a living trust already established. The refi company is taking that property out of the trust, doing the refi, but never putting that property back into the trust. So again, there's a disconnect with services that people offer. So we have clients that come and say, Mom and Dad established a trust 20 years ago. They went ahead and did a refi 5 years ago. Mom and Dad died. Guess what? Now we're in probate. So we not only want to go ahead and to be the service to establish a living trust, we want to make sure that the trust that was already established for you is properly vested. So if somebody comes to us and says, we refied, the refi company will not put that property back into the trust. We charge a nominal fee to go ahead and to draft the deed, and we will record that and put it back into the trust for you. On that note, we had a client who had tried to do her online estate planning. Came to us to go ahead and to notarize and witness all the documents. The documents looked good. They were all in place. However, on the Schedule A of the living trust, it listed their primary residence. So I asked the client, well, where's the quitclaim deed so that we can go ahead and notarize this, and that way you can transfer it into your trust? She said, what do you mean a quitclaim deed? Nobody told me I needed a quitclaim deed. They just asked me what my assets and my property were. So we went ahead and established and redrafted the quitclaim deed and recorded it for her on her behalf. So now her online estate planning service was at least complete. So that's kind of where Pro Se Legal is. We also do business formations on the LLC corporations. We help with contracts, caregiver contracts. Right now, you know, there's a lot of people going into people's homes to take care of them. You need to have a contract in place just to make sure that everybody's protected on both ends. We also do immigration. As I mentioned, I am also an immigration consultant. The church I went to primarily was a bilingual church, so I would see a lot of injustice in our immigrant communities. And every day I'd get that tap on my, shoulder, Hermana Kim, I have a question, Sister Kim, I have a question. So there I would go, and I started thinking, oh my God, there's so much injustice, within this community. I need to do something to help. So with that being said, every single one of our offices, which now we have 2, soon to be 3, we have a bilingual paralegal in every single one of our offices to help assist our Spanish-speaking community. If we open an office and it happens to be in a different immigrant community, I will find a paralegal that speaks that language, just so we can better serve our community in an overall fashion. So with that being said, any questions that are going to come? I know somebody had asked a question about a power of attorney and a living trust. Number one thing a lot of people don't understand about a power of attorney is the power of attorney is only valid while that individual is alive. Once that person passes away, the power of attorney passes away with them. When the person dies, the POA dies with them. People don't know that. They'll say, but the bank, I'm power of attorney. I need to go access the bank. Next thing they know, the bank account has been frozen because mom or dad or whomever has then passed away. So on our estate planning packages, we offer 2 very comprehensive packages. Our first package is a married couple at $9.95, and this is going to sound like a commercial, and I'm sorry. Our single package is $8.95, but let me explain what that entails. Your revocable living trust, your pour-over wills, your financial power of attorney, your health care power of attorney, your HIPAA waiver, and for those that are 60 and older, we actually offer a dementia document. In the event you start to lose your marbles, then what? Then we have our burial instructions. Yeah, come see us. Your burial instructions, and then we also draft the deed, and we actually use what's called Simplifile, which is an online e-recording system. So we are e-filing your deeds right upon signature. We're able to go ahead and to also draft deeds and record them out of state because we are not lawyers. Lawyers, as you know, cannot practice law or do anything outside of whatever state they are licensed in. And it includes all the notaries. So we have taken our clients and giving them a lot of extra services because when we do something, we want to make sure that it's done right. I don't want to draft a document and then 5 years later have you back in my office because somewhere in the beginning we did something incorrect. Number one, that's bad customer service and it's just bad business. We want you to come back to us because you referred family and you referred friends, or, you know, some other legal issue has come about. A question I did have posed to me was, daughter is power of attorney for mom. Mom has beginning stages of dementia. Brother is the primary agent. What can the daughter who lives close by do? Well, there's a lot of factors there. How severe is mom's dementia? Is she still able to go ahead and execute a document? Is mom willing to have brother and sister maybe be co-agents? Or, so that way they're both listed as number one, but maybe when number one is unavailable, then the other one can come into play. Or is brother willing to go ahead and to write a statement that he's currently out of town or unable to manage mom's affair, and the second agent comes up? So there's a lot of factors and there's a lot of weird questions that come into play. We can't give legal advice, but we can give you the practicality of it. If somebody comes into our office, they own multiple properties and all they have is a will, I can state a will still be probated. You might want to consider a living trust. A lot of people don't understand that. And again, there's a really big disconnect, especially in the immigrant communities, where people don't understand. They get their will and they think if I die, everything goes to my children. Not so. So pro se legal, again, it sounds like a commercial. I so apologize for that. But we're able to offer non-legal services to fill that gap in when a client or a person does not need an attorney. And when they do need an attorney, then we're able to go ahead and to refer them out to the appropriate attorney because of the resources that we have. On our family law, domestic violence is also on an uptick. We're able to go ahead and with our domestic violence clients, refer them out to public health or refer them out to a nonprofit agency so they can go ahead and get some sort of counseling. So we just don't want to do the paperwork for our clients. We really want to establish that relationship to make sure that they get from point A to point B. Any questions anybody has? Yes. Correct.
It can be a sole proprietor.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, give us a call. We actually offer a very comprehensive package, and you may need the whole package, or you might just need something simple. So give us a call. Okay.
Don't apologize for what you're doing, because it's important. My nickname, I was telling the speaker before, is the dot connector. And I had never heard of you, and I wish I had, because I know so many people that go to these free breakfasts, and they screw stuff up so badly. And I'd really like to see you get in touch with a couple like Gloria Harrison and different people that have the local papers. What you're doing needs to be told. The story needs to be told, because people are just getting raped.
Oh, absolutely. You know, when I ran the food bank, program, I mean, we had immigration clients that would come into my office where they paid an immigration, attorney $11,000, and nothing was ever filed on their behalf.
And done incorrectly.
Correct.
And then it's just horrific.
Correct. One thing, though, that we do as a pro se legal team is we actually have our clients engaged in what we are doing for them. They get copies of all of their documents. The communication is very one-on-one. You are assigned a paralegal. That paralegal or LDA assists you. So you're not bounced around, from like person
What's
to
an
person.
LDA?
An LDA is a legal document assistant.
Oh, okay.
Had I worked, let's say for Joe as the attorney, then I would be a paralegal.
Okay.
But those of us that are, quote, independent paralegals, the law states that we can't really classify ourselves as paralegals, so we're legal document assistants.
Well, I'm sure even Joe would admit that it's the paralegals that do a fairly large amount of the work.
I'm like, that's why his paralegal's here.
I'm gonna get some of your cards because at my office in real estate.
Yeah, absolutely.
We do a lot of notary on the document for the transfer of properties.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We would
I
be
can
happy to
recommend
help.
Put your card in our boards.
Yeah, and we do have bilingual staff, like I said. So, and they're completely versed in everything, in family law, probate, business formations, immigration, the estate planning, and then we get some off, we're looking at starting to do expungements because there's a need for that. I'm sure the public defender will go ahead and, and recognize that. We're looking at possibly maybe helping people fill out paperwork when it comes to the evictions. That's still kind of a fresh area, so we're just not quite sure. So we really want to be that resource for the community, that when they can't fill something out or they are self-represented, come to us and let us help you.
If you need it, one of my best friends from college days has probably the largest and the best interpreting for the court system. And she has over 60 languages that she represents.
Nice.
Through court.
Nice. We do have another paralegal that I work with. Her and I have a very good relationship. She is of Arab nationality.
Okay.
So when we do get some of those clients, I always want to make sure that they're comfortable in whatever language.
Right.
So, yeah, but thank you.
When you want to put your property in the living trust, what does the servicer, meaning your lender, need to know, or what kind of communication needs to go to the bank, the servicer, the lender, about, and also, if you already are in a modification, and so does that affect you being able to, and do you have to make contact with the servicer when you put the property in the living trust?
No. So you don't put debt into the trust. So a lot of times we have clients who come in that are on reverse mortgage.
Yes,
And
that's what
so, and so maybe the property's valued at $500,000 and the reverse mortgage is only $200,000, and that's what they've pulled out. They still have that $300,000 in equity. That property is still their property. They need to put that into their living trust, because God forbid if they pass away, then that $300,000 is going to be probated because that wasn't protected. No, go ahead.
So I want to make sure I'm clear. The servicer has nothing to do with you putting that mortgage into the living trust.
No, and we had just did a living trust seminar a couple months back, and that was the #1 question posed. And I still have a mortgage. My property's in a trust. I think almost everybody in California still has a mortgage.
Right.
You know, but no, that is still your home.
Okay.
If I die today, then my children, who are the beneficiaries and the trustees, are going to determine what they need to do with that property. Are they going to sell it? Are they going to maybe pay off the mortgage? Are they going to rent it? Are there maybe other assets to pay off that mortgage? But they're able to have control of that asset as opposed to going to court. And again, everybody has equity in their house. You know, also mobile homes. You know, if a mobile home is valued over $166,000, that needs to be in a living trust, because the probate code under probate 13100 states any asset under under 166,000 is there's a simple form under the California probate code 13100 where you don't have to do a full probate. You fill out the simple form, and that asset's able to come to you. So we have clients that say, Mom died, there's $10,000 in the bank tells us we can't get it. Great, let's wait the 40 days, let's get a certified death certificate, we'll fill out the form, go to the bank and get your money. You know, and that's a service that we offer, but the banks don't tell people that. The banks, you know, will say stuff like, oh, well, you're not on title, or you need a court order, or you need whatever, and the kids are like, there's only $10,000 in there.
But an affidavit would also be able to allow you to talk to the lender if your spouse or loved one did die.
Correct.
If you're going through a foreclosure crisis,
Correct.
then they won't talk to you because you're not on, okay.
Yeah, correct. Or if you have a properly drafted power of attorney that allows for you to deal with real estate transactions, that allows you to go ahead and apply for government benefits on behalf of your, you know, person. So our power of attorneys have all lined item out all the powers. So that way it's just not limited. A lot of times people have what's called a limited power of attorney, and it doesn't take them a step further. Or some of the power of attorneys that you can get online stop when the individual becomes incapacitated, you know, mentally, or they lose their marbles. Well, that's why you need a power of attorney, you know? So again, there's just a huge vape, and there's a lot of resources out there, and there's a lot of non-lawyer legal stuff that you can do or we can assist with that people just don't know about. And, you know, like Joe said, you know, biblically, you know, for the lack of knowledge, people perish, bottom line, you know. And then all the pastors like when we do our estate planning topic, because for all those people that forgot to tithe during their lifetime, you know, can go ahead and leave 10% to the church, you know, upon passing, you know. So, hey, I got you covered on that end. Sure.
My mom did her will when I was 25 years old. Now I'm 65. We were reading last month the will, and then my sister were single. Everybody got married, divorced, remarried, and then the names changed.
Probably want to update that.
And then is update or create a new will?
You can do both. You can do update, it would be a codicil. I would suggest just probably getting a whole new one. Be a lot easier.
Okay, thank you.
And then when, yes? No, it's okay, I'll get him next.
You touched on domestic violence. The domestic violence is for a male.
No, domestic violence is for everybody.
Oh, okay. Is there resources for him? He was arrested in his home by someone that had a restraining order on him. Is there anything he could do about that?
So what kind of he needs counseling, or he needs, if it was a false accusation, I'm sure that the public defender's office would actually have a lot more resources. But I mean, COVID, unfortunately, there's an uptick in domestic violence. There's an uptick in divorces. We had a lady come into our office. She was getting ready to divorce her husband for the second time. Because COVID, they had come together and they couldn't get out of the house, and you know what I mean? And so I had asked her, I said, are you sure you want to do this? COVID's going to end, because I don't want to do your divorce a second time and you guys get remarried again, and then it just be this back and forth. And she said, yeah, you're probably right. So she hasn't called us back. Yeah, uncontested divorces.
Oh, I have a case.
Oh, okay. If it's contested, they're going to an attorney.
Yeah, because
Let's get this last question in.
Okay, my question is the administrator over by, is the administrator the same thing as power of attorney?
No, so the administrator and the executor come into play when an individual has passed away. So a trustee for the trust, an executor for the will. The power of attorney is for health and finances, and that's when the person is alive.
Okay, then my question also is, let's say the adult, the parent owes our IRS over $10,000. Is that child liable for that IRS debt? Okay.
So I can't give legal advice, and there are two attorneys in the room, and I'm going to be quiet and divert that to them.
Okay.
However, when you have a trust and you have a will, it is the trustee and the executor's responsibility to pay all debt.
The trustee, me?
The trustee and the executor to pay all debt.
Okay, all right, I got
I have another question maybe for both of you. It's about this Medicare. I know that, when you sign for Medicare, I'm new 65 years old. And then they said if you get some medical assistant or something during some time, then when you die, you don't have nothing to will because the government gonna take over the property for whatever they pay.
Yes.
Can you give me some information?
So let me tell you, that's called Medi-Cal estate recovery. So the law changed in 2017 to state that if a property was non-probatable, meaning non-probatable, it was either held in joint tenancy or it was in a trust. So a non-probatable property could not have a state recovery from those that were on Medi-Cal benefits who were in a skilled nursing facility. So you're absolutely right. So if my property, I get on Medi-Cal and I die and I'm in skilled nursing for, 45 days, and the state covered me for $30,000, they will throw a lien on that property to recoup those $30,000. You're absolutely right. When you fill out that Medi-Cal application, there's that little tiny word, at the bottom, which nobody reads and nobody tells you about. It's called a state recovery, but it's only for probatable properties. So a non-probatable, again, the property's held in joint tenancy or it's in a living trust, the state cannot come back and recoup. We should probably do a workshop on that. All right, thank you, guys.
Come on, thank him. I like to say that as to certain issues, there are certain professionals that have forgotten more about the issue than I know. This would be one of those times, okay? She knows all about this stuff, like all over the place. And you will see Pro Se Legal popping up on storefronts in the area. There'll probably be 5 or so by the end of the year. I wouldn't be surprised, and even more. And you see why that is. Now, as a quick comparison, and before we move on, and actually I'll have you, Dora, why don't you come on up because we're getting ready to talk. One of the things that we'll say and that we offer, and I think that that came through with what Kimberly was saying, is we offer relationship. A lot of times people think they have, maybe you have a subscription legal service or prepaid legal or whatever else. You have, what you don't have is a relationship. You do LegalZoom and you're independent like that and it works, fantastic. God love you. But what LegalZoom won't tell you is that they have a very high failure rate because often people don't make it all the way through the documents, okay, and you've already paid for it. But what's interesting here is you don't have to pay $5,000 to $10,000 to have a relationship with somebody that you can call. So imagine being able to call somebody like her. That's what we're offering, okay? So I'm gonna need a second mic because actually we're gonna sit down and just do a question and answer. Does this one work? Can we use this one? Okay, fantastic. So, and I can hold this as well. Here is our public health connection, the connection between legal and public health. We're setting, just like I said before, we are setting this model on its ear in terms of being able to offer people a look or a view into what public health ought to be. We want people to understand that public health will include having legal services and that there's a public health connection to legal as well. And so Dora Barilla is helping us with that. By the way, for those of you that have seen our podcast, the Joe Speak podcast is on all of the platforms. It's also on YouTube. We just released a podcast with Dora yesterday, by the way, okay? So Dora owns a company called HC2 Strategies.
That's it.
Okay, HC2 Strategies, and HC stands for?
Healthy Connected Communities.
Healthy Connected Communities. And what's interesting about what Dora does is we all kind of have a moment where, hopefully, where what it is that you've been doing, you've been dedicated to for a long time, the world starts paying attention to. And so now the world is paying attention to public health, but she's been doing that for 30 years, okay? And so why don't we talk a little bit, first of all, Dora, tell us about your journey to public health and how you got to doing what you normally do now.
Well, thank you, Joe, and it's just a real pleasure to be here, and I'm excited about this journey and really looking at supporting healthy communities and how can we do that in a way that probably we've never done before. So I think a real opportunity. But thank you, Joe, for the question. I've always wanted to help people and to really look at, how do we keep people healthy? And originally it was like, okay, you eat right and exercise, right? That's being healthy. Yeah, not to dismiss that, because we all need to exercise and eat healthy, but it really is just a much more holistic way of really looking at what creates health. And so I really got my bachelor's of science in sports medicine and realized, in my first, my early 20s, that it wasn't about eating right and exercising. I was working for a managed care organization, so I was looking at people that were utilizing health services quite a bit. And it really occurred to me very early on in my career, like the big light bulb went on, that it's really about social connections, what we're calling either social determinants of health or population health or whatever it is. It's about what is it in a community that really, what makes you healthy? And it really is those social connections, not only your behaviors, but what are the resources offered to you, what education, and so that was really my journey into looking at a much more holistic way and really looking at how we can start to build trust. I often tease that, my kids used to say, well, what do you do? What do you do? Because, it's like, I'm a doctor of public health, and what does that mean? And people finally know. And I'll talk a little bit about, my journey in this last year and a half with COVID that has really kind of shifted the way I'm thinking about how I'm using my skills that God gave me.
So what should we be thinking about when we hear terms like community health and well-being and whole health and those types of things? Let's set some terms so people really ought to know that there's something behind these terms or things we should be looking for, things that we should be thinking about when we're talking about these terms in this space.
Right. Well, in healthcare, we call it whole person care, or, just really looking at a holistic thing. But if you think about it, what makes you, let's go to you as an individual in your family, in your community. What makes you whole? What makes you healthy? And how can we rather than a profession telling you what that is, that you're really thinking about what is it that is going to give you agency in life? What is it that's going to make you want to get up in the morning? What are those things? So really, and it starts obviously with eating and having safety and having a home, right? But then also having a safe neighborhood. So there's so many elements that are really involved in looking at, kind of that whole person. And so, but really not having us define it, but individuals and communities really helping define it. And that's why I think, just thinking about what are your needs that need to be met in order for you to feel safe and for you to feel healthy.
What are some of the things, now we're getting into our pandemic public service announcement section. Let's talk about some of the things that you would want people to see that connect the dots with what you do every day, that really should be in full view with the pandemic in general, the uptick that we're dealing with in particular, and what we ought to be thinking about right now related to that. Let's give folks the playing field on that.
Yeah, and I want to just preface this with a little story I actually told Joe this morning. I'm a doctor of public health. And I think the most recent data I have is in February of 2021. We had 180 state and local public health officials either resign, be threatened out of office, or leave office for some reason. That is the nation's mass exodus of public health professionals in our nation's history. Okay, so just let that resonate for a moment. And so as you think about what are, really, and I know I'm one of the public health professionals, but really, our job is to protect the public's health. And it has been politicized. There's been a lack of trust, and Joe talked about that. People really have a lack of trust. And so public health professionals have been doing the best that they can with getting information that we know. And the reality is there was a lot that we didn't know. And so I just preface that by asking us to come into a common space of what we know, and that we all have a common that we want to protect ourselves, protect our families, and protect our communities. And so I want to start with that because I was actually working for the third largest health system in the country when the pandemic broke. One of the first cases was in our hospital. And I happened to be laid over in an airport in Seattle when the outbreaks were really happening. And so I sat there for 16 hours watching news, watching data. And as as it unfolded over the year, we got the best information that we could. And, there was, just on top of just historical mistrust, that information was trying to get out as quickly as we could. So I just, as we think about this, we really need to think about where is the information and the data coming from? And I always like to say, in God we trust, all others bring data.
That's right.
And so as a public health professional, always looking at what is the data telling us? Not what are the stories that you're hearing? What is the data? So I, from early on, actually one of our local companies in the Inland Empire, Esri, had the backbone for the Johns Hopkins data in terms of what's been happening. And we know that we had a mass pandemic, not only here in the US, but in the world. The world has changed. We know that, like Joe mentioned, what COVID exposed to us is the disparities in our country that have been there for a long time, but they were magnified and amplified due to COVID. Some people were disproportionately impacted because of COVID. We know that people died. In our country alone, 602,000 people died of COVID. Let that resonate. We know that in the midst of the pandemic in December and January, that over 3,000 people were dying every day of COVID. It has gone down to about 300. Okay, that is on the uptick. 97% of those deaths could be prevented now. We do know that we have an emergency authorized vaccine. We do know that it is safe. We do know that there is some mistrust of the vaccine. I was one of the first to get it. We know that it is safe. If you think about the vaccines, when we were kids, they did not have the scrutiny. The world looked at the vaccines. I'm here as a public health professional begging you, go out and get your vaccine. They're available now. When they first came out, it was hard to get them. Now they are available. We know that the vaccines are decreasing the incidence of COVID. We also know that the uptake that's happening right now is in the unvaccinated population. And what happens is, yes, there are cases where there are breakthrough cases where people that have been vaccinated are getting COVID, but that's because the virus is allowed to mutate. We need to address this. This is real. People are dying, and I say that from, really looking at being in the health system where we had to order refrigerators to hold the dead bodies. Okay. It was one of the most devastating, traumatic experiences. And I understand that, people have the mistrust. But if you look at, really the public health conversation, how can we protect ourselves? Also, there's things that we do know. We know that social distancing, we know that that masking up makes a difference. If you look at the incidence rate from when, in California, I think it was June 15th that they, started lightening up on the mask mandates, the incidence started going up. The Delta variant is real. If you look at, where do you get information? I go to every day, I'm on the Johns Hopkins looking at the data, not only in the US, but in the, all the other countries. I sit on the board for Medical Teams International. We are having little countries throughout the world that are being decimated by COVID. And we have the resource, the education, and the knowledge to address this as a community. And so this is what we know. Some basic public health measures decrease COVID. We know that masking, social distancing, washing your hands, using good measures are making a difference.
Excellent. Let's talk about, and guys, at the risk of taking a chance, that's where we stand on the vaccination. You ought to be getting vaccinated. Did I say before? 99% of the people that are dying did not get the vaccination, okay? Governor of Alabama was talking about people getting vaccinated yesterday. Alabama is 33% vaccinated, and they are suffering a consequence because of it, okay? The worst thing that could have happened is this thing got politicized. It's the worst thing that could have happened. But if you weren't sure whether or not the vaccination works, you should know now that it does work, all right? So let's talk a little bit about health and equity, equity in the well-being framework. Talk about the drivers of health, if you will, the health, well-being, and equity, and how what you're trying to do connects to equity, and kind of where we're going, and then we'll sew it up by connecting it to legal being a part of that whole person health as well.
Yeah, well, you think about what are the drivers of health. I mean, just the basic senses of safety, food, housing are pretty commonly known. But also, what about that sense of kind of that civic muscle, that your ability to have meaningful work, the ability to be able to make a living, the ability to be able to achieve an education. Those are all the things that are clearly drivers of health. If you're not working and you don't have employment, that's going to be a real impact on your health. And I don't mean to dismiss, having access to health care and all of those other things, but we clearly know that there are other drivers of health. We know that, in our country that we don't have equal distribution of health. That's very well known. And so as we begin to talk about equity, it's not only about having access to health care, and I don't mean to minimize that, but what other resources do you have access to that that enable you to really begin to look at making a difference? Kim, I'm not doing a commercial either, but you can't. What did you say, Joe? You can't buy you can't sell what you don't buy. So my husband and I actually, when I was asked to work with McCune Wright and Pro Se Legal, went through Pro Se Legal, and it's just thought we'd clear up some loose ends, and so just had some deed and just a few issues, and she'd ask some questions, and I saw too many nurses making wills in bathrooms during the COVID. Oh, yeah. And just really making sure that we had all of our ducks in a row. And spent a couple hours with Kim, and we ended up going through our shed, and there were some old legal documents that we had, and he goes, well, we need to talk to Kim. But the point is that, having access to those services, to that basic information, not everybody has that. And so, you don't even know what you don't know. And there's so much about just in terms of the drivers of health, in terms of keeping, they always say the rich get richer. Well, it's because they had information in terms of how to retain their assets. That's right. And as a community, in terms of looking at public health, having your assets, your home, you worked hard for that your whole life. And to see that just decimated because you didn't have some basic protections that we all should have known, those are real drivers of health.
Yeah, that's right. So tell us, I'm excited about it. I know the answer to this question. I love pitching softballs. Tell them this, tell them this. Tell us what you're going to be doing as part of the McCune Wright team. And this is where we're flipping it. Nobody's doing this. Tell us how, we got together. You got together with Rich, our managing partner. Shout out to Rich McCune, our managing partner, who's putting folks in place and letting them do what they do. Talk about how you're bringing what you do to MWA to move us forward, basically with a public health view that includes legal as part of whole person health.
Yeah, so how exciting to be able to speak about public health from where I'm sitting today. I mean, that's pretty exciting. Nuts, yeah. And so to think about that in all honesty, I really did some vetting when I was asked, and I, just looked at the legal firm and looked at what they were trying to do, and I'm sold. It is really looking about how do we create health in individuals and in communities for everyone, not just those that can afford a lawyer and that can easily access, the network, their network of influencers and people that, often drive decisions. But we can really begin to look at the whole person, not only in terms of, I can talk about COVID and share why you should get a vaccine and still wear a mask and wash your hands. And Joe can sit right next to me and talk about some of the legal implications of COVID and what are, some of the employment issues, because that's the whole picture. In the last 18 months, we really got to see that what COVID did and how it impacted like our healthcare system, that we weren't prepared. We weren't ready to address all of the issues that really impacted with a pandemic impacts. With a more inclusive looking at what we call the vital conditions of health in a community, we can really impact health. Not looking at it from a deficit model of always trying to react to disease and react to what's happening in our community, but we can actually sit back and say, what creates life? And how can we start promoting that and working on that in our communities rather than a deficit model?
Fantastic. Any questions? What we're saying is that basically if the law, I deal with equity issues. I look for equity issues. I look for equity Goliaths to slay, okay? Except I'm a David with resources, okay? We're looking for equity issues. Health is a cornerstone equity issue. And so, you remember, for those of us that paid attention in math, I didn't after 10th grade, but that's another story. I can tell you everything I've been delivered from. If A equals B, B equals, and B equals C, then A equals C. Same thing. If law connects to equity and equity connects to health, then law actually connects to health. Okay? Because among other things, we want folks to be able to get around the corner and deal with these issues before they become issues. You just heard Kimberly say that something that's non-probatable cannot be touched. Just in case we didn't button that up, I think we did, but in case we didn't button that up, the whole thing about probate, the whole thing about having something in the trust is it keeps it out of probate. That's the whole point. Keeps it out of probate. Your will says this is where I want it to go. Your trust says here's where it is. Your trustee and your administrator make sure that it happens, and you stay out of court, and never the twain shall meet. That's the whole point. Imagine dealing with those issues when folks die. You're already dealing with the trauma of people dying. So just deal with things ahead of time to the extent that one can. It has a potential to affect or simplify your financial planning, all of the things that it is that we're doing, but we want legal to be part of your whole person health. That's where we're going, okay? Yeah?
And just to piggyback off of what Dora said is, on just talking about public health, with domestic violence and divorces, I mean, you're dealing with some PTSD, you're dealing with depression. People, we had a gentleman that lost his business during COVID. He actually, from the stress, developed Parkinson's disease. He came in just so that we could dissolve his LLC and send one simple paper into the Secretary of State. He passed away.
Right.
Because of the stress.
Yeah.
And it makes me think, had he maybe reached out to somebody when that issue started, then he could have, adequate health resources to that. Maybe they could have helped him with, cope with that stress. Right. And I so appreciate the fact that health is so pertinent with legal, again, because of the PTSD stuff, because of depression, because of anger issues, and then that filters out and still affects society. People lose their homes. I mean, I'm sure the public defender, people just, stuff happens. People snap just because of stress.
Yep, absolutely. And being able to provide those supportive services, around legal is really exciting. So I'm already cloning and scaling Kimberly.
That's where we're going. Any other questions?
Still the 3-year rule in contemplation of, so when people go, well, I'm not old enough to need a living trust, but if you do it, and then there used to be a 3-year rule that if you didn't do it by then they could revoke it.
Kim, what would you say about that? That doesn't exist, does it? It doesn't ring a bell with me. I've been doing this for a minute. It doesn't ring a bell with me. So, no, I think that I don't think that's an issue.
Okay.
Who's, yes, ma'am, go ahead.
As a retired public health educator, I would like for us to take a look at the social determinants of health really start with public policy.
Yes,
And we have to be more engaged in that process so that the things in our community that need to get attention,
right,
such as part of this COVID situation was a tremendous upkick in mental health.
Yeah, that's right.
And we really need to be able to figure out how to address the policy. For example, Public Health Department just changed its whole org chart. Public health is now under Public Works. You know what Public Works does?
Really?
Cut the lawnmower and that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So when you see those kinds of changes and shifts, you know that it's not in our best interest and that we need to engage so that we can get the most out of those departments that need to be able to happen.
That's one of the things that's nice about what I do is part of my job is going to be advocacy. And so we can weigh in on issues and things that are happening and how they affect the conditions of the people that we serve, and that would be very much in line with that.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that, because that's so key. And we know that historically we've had, just an underinvestment, and it can't happen anymore. And just to be partnered with legal is really exciting, to be able to highlight those, elevate those, and challenge some of those.
Right. Go ahead, Linda.
Public. Thank you, Beverly, for that, because I can echo that. But what I really want to say first is that this room should be filled,
Yeah.
number one.
Right, sure.
People go to the trust because it is a trusted, go to the church because it's trusted. So I've been funded by the state of California. I just don't do the Inland Empire any longer. And I'm finding out when I'm dealing with Los Angeles, it's totally different from what you are doing now. The process in getting the funds down to the city and county of San Bernardino is atrocious. To get the services out because it's atrocious. The next thing is that we have partnered, we're on our 8th church, and so I will hire liaisons from the church. I'm just going to say publicly, the next one you all do, I definitely want to be a part of that because the church is what needs or who needs this information more than ever.
Right.
And that is something we must do a much better job.
Yeah.
This is such vital information that we all need desperately.
Yeah.
So we need to redo this all over again.
Well, it'll also be available on demand
And
as
let me
well. That's why
just-
we're recording it. Yeah.
And let me say this to you as well. Just yesterday, $20 million is out there.
Yeah.
So I'm here on a fact-finding mission
Sure.
to see what attorneys I can use
Sure.
in my network. They're
Right.
giving out to 10 agencies. And so it's important because you have all the components
Right.
of everything, all the resources
Right.
of everything that I believe that HUD is telling me, who sent it to me, Linda, we need your help. And I'm seeing what I'm seeing, but we as the community, we got to do a much better
Right.
job in
Right.
getting this information out
Oh,
to
yeah.
make a difference. So I definitely want to make sure I talk to you out.
Well, the information is available, and that's what we want people to know, for sure.
Yeah, and this is our first, one of our first clinics. I know Joe's been doing them a couple, but,
Right.
that's the whole point. Amen to your statement, because we need to do this as community. We can't do
Right.
this alone. We can't do this in silos. That's why, being a public health officer, working with a law firm is really exciting, because let's not go back to normal.
Right.
Let's go back to better, and let's go back together.
If COVID didn't change you, you weren't paying attention,
Yeah.
spiritually and otherwise, really. Was there a question here?
I didn't have a question, I just wanted to say thank you for the information.
Oh, you got it.
And health. I want to piggyback on what Kimberly said. Most of my patients it has been COVID-related stress, strokes, early Alzheimer's. Health is very important, and it's the number one thing before anything. If you don't have your health, you don't have anything.
That's right. Last question here.
Yes. I have two things to talk about, and it's very quick. And it's about the protection that the medical personnel got in case of, like in ICU. I was with malpractice because they neglect me. And then I had an infiltration in my arm, and I almost lose my arm. And then you see this? I didn't come with this.
Wow.
And then I'm a realtor, and then I wasn't able to come back to my work for 4 months being in the hospital.
Oh, wow.
And then, but the question is this, that I see that most of the nurses that were assisting me there, when I talk to them, they graduate as a nurses in Philippines. And then they come here, they just only do the test that is to upgrade. They don't go to over other things, but they don't have the experience. And then I see that I go to my regular group of medical doctor, and never I see a doctor. I always see a nurse practitioner. And then what happened? I'm very sorry for all these doctors that spend 15, 20 years of their life going to school, and they have big loans, student loans, and they are not hired because they are going with the cheap. This is one of the things. And the other thing is there is something, that how can I tell you this? My doctor, I have one attorney that he got two more, and they said they fathered and two kids. And then they are looking at my case, but they said there was a law in California that even that you, but if it is COVID-related or something, they cannot sue the medical or the hospital. And then how real is this? Because this was that, for what they were telling me, I was in coma. And then they were telling me that the nurse at this time didn't want to report it, that I had the infiltration. She waited for the next and the next. And they let me like to be a balloon with all the antibiotic that I had.
Right.
And then now is the question, my attorney is telling me, I don't know if I'm going to take this case.
Right.
After 8,500 pages that my medical records sent from the hospital to them. And then it's,
Well, I can't weigh in on your legal situation, but you have to remember that we're related to COVID issues. There's not a lot of precedent. In other words, it's not necessarily clear that a hospital or whoever else would be liable based on something that they did not know. So timing and things like that is going to figure in. We also don't have a playing field for it. We haven't dealt with it before. And then the final part of medical negligence that's difficult is that under the state law, your damages are limited. And so there's an act called MICRA, going back to 1978, is that on the intangible or emotional distress related damages, your maximum recovery is $250,000. The maximum recovery or percentage from the attorney is relatively low. And so unless you've got huge damages, attorney might be less likely to take the case, but because it will be fought very vigorously on the other end, and in a contingency fee business, it may not make cost sense for them to do. I can't weigh on your case in particular, but medical negligence cases are difficult to begin with, and they're probably made more difficult by the fact that we're in a new area because they don't know how they're going to come out. Because how many people, can you imagine how many people could actually sue for medical negligence related to COVID? I don't know that there's a specific law that says you can't do it. I don't really know that, but it would be a difficult case, and I think that that's what your attorney is telling you, that it's difficult. Let's get this question real fast, and then I'm going to bring Derek up. Go ahead.
My concern is that the current administration said Tuesdays ago that they want to mandate people, and my radio station, 107.9, they're going to knock on your door to see if you've been vaccinated. Now, we have a member at our church, and some of y'all know who she is. She has a lung condition, and she is not going to get the vaccine. Okay, but she's talking about, okay, here's my point. Has the health department got those orders down that you're going to knock on our door? Come into the neighborhood, because that's what they said.
I'm not in that space.
Yeah, no, I mean, and again, just making sure that we're, checking our information, because there's a lot of fear out there.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
The current administration, the president said that they're gonna implement this so that the community, supposedly helping the community, so everybody's vaccinated. Everybody don't want to be vaccinated.
Yeah.
That's my point.
And I think, there's going to be, this is unprecedented times, unprecedented times. I think what the move right now is, let's get as many people vaccinated as we can. Because the reality is, and, maybe there's some, people are afraid, of the hospitals were filled, and it was a horrible situation. And so I think it's really a matter and an effort to get as many people vaccinated as we can.
I really got that. I guess the reason I brought it up is because you're going to have some people say no. Now what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Right, but if they're saying no because they don't feel like it, they're wrong.
Okay.
If they're saying no because they have a legitimate health concern related to it, that's a separate question entirely. But how you deal with it, we don't get to look back 103 years ago. Last time we dealt with a pandemic, here's what we had, here's the access we had, here's the things that we can do, and here's how we'll deal with it. We're still doing that as we go. We don't have that. We don't have that muscle memory and that institutional knowledge. So, yeah, should there be a discussion related to people that are having health issues And those health issues might make it more of a risk for them, a legitimate risk to have the vaccination? Yes. But does that also mean that they should be going and getting on planes? I had somebody come to me and say, I don't want to get the vaccination. I want you to do a presentation and help me understand whether or not they can keep me from doing all the things that I want to do that put other people in jeopardy because they don't want to do the vaccination. I have no sympathy for that position, right? But there are people in the category that you're talking about, and I think there has to be an acknowledgement with that. So, okay, good stuff. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank Dora. Thank you very much, Dora. We're running a little late, but we've got some great information we provide people, and I think everybody's enjoying it and getting a lot out of it, and so I appreciate everyone going with it. I want to quickly recognize one of our San Bernardino City Councilmen from the 7th Ward, Damon Alexander. Thank you for being here, sir. I appreciate you being here. I know who you are. I don't know that we've met, but I really appreciate you being here, and I want you, let's talk afterward, because I just want you to let folks know that we're really here to be a resource. That we're based, the firm is based in the Inland Empire. Right now, we have an office on West Hospitality, and we'll be there for another year or so, but we're close, and we want to connect the dots. So I'm going to bring Derek up, and he can come and take the mic. Should it be this mic or that mic, or does it matter, guys? Doesn't matter, okay. So Derek Smith, I said it a little bit earlier, South Central does it like nobody does. We're from the same area, grew up, we met at Redlands. He was a football player, I was not. You can see by how he's built. He still looks like he could play football. And the rest of us need grace, okay? And so Derek is way up in the public defender's office. Whenever he got it, it seemed like he knew that he wanted to do criminal law. And he's done that his entire career. That's where he's been the whole time. He approaches it with sensitivity. I hope you guys get the memo. Listen, if you want to hire a fantastic lawyer that you can pay for, fantastic. I hope it really goes well, and I've got some names in that regard. But you can get a high-quality service with the public defender's office. Derek has tried everything from misdemeanors to murder cases and everything in between, but he has a lot to do with how attorneys come up and how they learn how to practice law right. And so he's going to give us some information. I told him to talk about what he wants to talk about, to let folks know things that they need to know. And so, you know, info is power. So let's thank Derek for coming. Thank you, Derek. You want to grab that one? Or grab this? Okay, go ahead.
A topic that is in high demand right now, and that is our post-conviction services. Right now, the law has been changed and is very favorable for individuals that have criminal records. The law recognizes that in order for you to provide for yourself, that you need a job, you need housing, you need a way to support you and your family. So the law is now trying to address that issue. And one of the main things that takes care of that is Penal Code Section 1203.4. A lot of people will talk about expungement clinics. I call it record clinics, and there's a reason why. An expungement, I'll give you the definition as written by the American Bar Association. It's to erase or remove completely. The problem with that is a 1203.4 does not erase your criminal record from your rap sheet. And I'll go into it and explain more about that. When a person has satisfied their terms of probation, they've done everything that the court has asked them to, and certain criteria are met with that, the law says that you are entitled to have that case dismissed. So my office goes and we check the rap sheets, we check the factors for each individual, and those people that are entitled to a dismissal as a matter of right, we help them get that accomplished. Now, there are some exclusions to the 1203.4. Some of those exclusions are the type of charge. There are some very serious charges that are not allowed to be dismissed pursuant to Penal Code Section 1203.4. If you are still on probation, you are not allowed to have your record cleared at that point. However, there is Penal Code Section 1203.3, which allows us to help you get your probation terminated early. Certain criteria have to be met for that as well, But if you've been doing well, you've got a job that's pending, we can make a pretty good argument for you before the court to say, hey, court, this particular individual has done X, Y, and Z. We think that they're a great candidate to have their probation terminated. And then that allows us, if the court agrees to terminate probation, then we can move forward with the 1203.4, which is available to get that charge dismissed from your record. Now, if you've been to prison, that is another potential exclusion. It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone that's been to prison cannot have their record dismissed. There are certain provisions, certain people who've gone to prison who can have a 1203.4 granted. This is a very common question. Does a 1203.4 erase your criminal record? I touched on that earlier. It does not. What it does do is it changes your record where it once said that there was a conviction for a particular charge. It now changes your rap sheet to say that it's a dismissal. So it will still show up on your rap sheet as an arrest, the date, the time, the location, all of that will still show up on your record, but it will now show up as a case that has been dismissed, and which is important. And people ask, well, what's the point if it's still going to show up on my rap sheet? What's the importance of having that taken care of? Well, if you have a dismissal, jobs that were previously unavailable to you now are available to you. Housing that was previously unavailable to you is now available to you. If you are trying to get your license with the California State Real Estate Board, you are now able to go and fill out an application and apply for that licensing. Now, because that is a government agency, you cannot say, oh, I don't have any prior convictions. But what you can say is, I have a prior conviction, but that prior conviction has been dismissed. And there is a distinction with what you can tell a government agency about 1203.4 and what you can tell a private agency. If you are applying for jobs at a private entity and they ask about prior convictions and you've had a 1203.4 granted on a particular case, you can tell that private entity that you do not have a prior conviction. Now that's different if you're applying to become a police officer, if you're applying to be an employee at a local government agency, if you work trying to get a job for the county, if you're trying to get a job for the state. If you apply to one of these governmental agencies, you have to answer that differently. You have to say, I have a prior conviction. But what you also should share is, although I have this prior conviction, I have a 1203.4 that was granted, and this case has now been dismissed. And with that disclosure, again, the law is shifting to recognize that everyone needs to have an opportunity to provide for themselves and their families. So they're trying to address that. If you have been rehabilitated, if you have a conviction from 20 years ago, and those 20-year-old convictions were hurting people from getting jobs, from getting housing, now you can move in a different space and try and get that job that you were prevented from getting before. So it's very important, and I encourage everyone to reach out to an attorney, and you really should. All of their exclusions, you should talk to an attorney about how that exclusion affects you. Don't listen to what I'm telling you, because I'm giving just a general presentation about 1203.4 and its impact and its exclusions. But everyone has a different set of facts. And so you should speak to an attorney about your particular facts and how that plays into whether you are excluded from 1203.4 or you're eligible for 1203.4. So some people will ask, well, what if I'm not eligible for a 1203.4? And that's often the case. And if you're not eligible for a 1203.4, there is another way that you can get something to help you with your record, and that's called a certificate of rehabilitation. And there's an application process, and there are certain criteria that you also have to meet with a certificate of rehabilitation. What are the benefits of a certificate of rehabilitation because you're not getting a dismissal for that particular charge. But what it does is it allows employers, it allows the licensing board the opportunity to see that a court has made a determination that you have been rehabilitated. Because in order for a certificate of rehabilitation, you have to do an application process. You have to go through, I'll get you in a second, you have to go through the court system, and the judge makes a decision as whether to grant the certificate of rehabilitation. So if the court grants that certificate of rehabilitation, there's another thing that happens. You are automatically then sent, your information is sent to the governor's office for a pardon application. So certificate of rehabilitation starts an automatic process for a pardon. So that's very beneficial. And generally what the courts want to see is they want to see what you've done after your conviction. There's certain residency requirements. If you're in California, you have to be a resident of California for 5 years prior to applying for the certificate of rehabilitation. You have to be free from prison for 7 years. And then you also have to have had a case that sent you to state prison, or certain significant misdemeanors also make you eligible for a certificate of rehabilitation when you would have been ineligible for a 1203.4. Yes, sir, you had a question.
Who issues the certificate of rehabilitation? Does the court issue it? Does the CDCR issue it? Or who's the authority that says you've been rehabilitated?
It's a court order.
Okay, so where do I go? Do I Google it and say, okay, I'm going to go to this agency and this agency? So who's the agency that issues the certificate of rehabilitation?
If you have a case in San Bernardino County, you can reach out to the San Bernardino County Public Defender's Office. We have a unit, post-conviction unit, that deals primarily with certificate of rehabilitation. There's an information packet. We send that out to you. You fill out that information, and we walk you through the steps. We file it with the court. There's a court date. On that court date, we provide the court with all the supporting information that they need to help you in your process. And then you have a date before that court. That court either decides they're going to grant that certificate of rehabilitation or deny it.
So there's no third-party agency that does this?
There are private companies that do it, but why not go to one of the best?
Straight to the source, I understand.
Yeah, yes, sir.
For the public to know where to go, because it's not for me, but
Yeah, you can look.
Councilman's clean. Good.
You're telling me on my rap.
Yes. You can look on the state website, and there is information about a certificate of rehabilitation on the state's website.
Okay, sounds good.
Yes.
Also, I would just like to refer people and recommend highly to get involved with a local nonprofit. I've been in town now for 14 years, and for 13 of those, I've been on the advisory board for Time for Change Foundation. And Kim Carter and her group just does so much good, and they can help you help others. And she's now moved up to Northern California, and we're spreading our work around. I've helped them raise over 6 figures. And there are some good, and there are some really horrible nonprofits. And you can talk to me afterwards, because as everybody knows, I'm pretty outspoken in the city of San Bernardino and beyond. But we have to work together, and we all need to give back.
Absolutely. The question then follows, well, what if I'm not eligible, or what if I don't have a certificate of rehabilitation granted? There is also an application process where you can apply to the governor's office for a pardon. I can tell you that there is no time frame set in stone in which a pardon has to be addressed. And so you could file that petition with the governor's office, and it may sit there for years. So there is no time frame in which they have to respond to that petition for a pardon. But if I give you any piece of advice, the best piece of advice I can give you today is if you are interested in having your record cleared, speak with an attorney about your particular situation. Don't listen to the generals that I've shared today. This is just me sharing nuggets of information, but to really deal with your particular situation, you need to speak with an attorney. Because there have been times when people think that they aren't eligible, but then they are eligible because they fall into a special category or they check off certain boxes. So the best information I can give you today, if you know someone, if you personally would like to have your record clear, speak with an attorney about your particular situation so that we can at least do an evaluation of your factors and let you know what you're eligible for. All right? Any other questions?
Yeah, actually, I'll get a little personal. So my son had a drinking problem years back and caught some DUIs. And we were able to hire an attorney and go ahead and get the expungements for him. And now he's working with Utah Department of Corrections. So in fact, that program or that expungement really does work.
I can share, just recently, an individual was pretty desperate, asking for help, saying that he wasn't able to find a job. And this may be on some of our social medias, but this particular individual said that he was homeless, said that he wasn't able to get a job. He went through our process, and now with his union, he's now eligible for positions paying upwards of $30 an hour. So that's a huge swing from just months before, where he couldn't find a job, couldn't hold down housing because of his situation, to have his record clear, and then doors start to open up. So it's absolutely an invaluable service that we offer, and that we've sort of honed our skills over the past several years, and we do a fairly good job. And within this particular county, we're still evolving with our process and how frequently we get our cases into court. And so it's a really invaluable service that I think that if you have a family member, a friend, anyone, refer them to us so that we can at least examine their situation and try and help them out.
You guys are so good, and you can ask the Public Defender's Office to come out, and I've had them for my, we need to have them for Rotary. I've had them come out to my Black Chamber of Commerce group, and they did a 2-hour presentation, and it was in-depth, and I mean, you guys just give of yourselves. And I got involved. I've been in the city for 14 years. 13 years ago, little Anthony Ramirez was murdered over at Martin Luther King. And that's how I got involved in the city. And people just think I'm out to get rid of the jerks and the crooks in San Bernardino, and I am. And I'm working on it again. Pastor Beckley and I work together very closely. But this PD office, I've lived in 14 cities around the world, and this is the best PD, Public Defender's Office, I've ever worked with. And I'm just a huge fan of you guys. And they will come out and give, like I said, a 2-hour lecture. And they bring a whole crew with them. And you learn so much. You learn so much.
Yeah, we are a service for the community. And I share this as often as I can. Other people may see my clients as criminals and bad people. I see them as clients. Everyone needs to have someone fighting in their corner. And that's what I do. And I wake up every morning and I enjoy it. And so I recognize who some of my clients are, but at the same time, they need someone to advocate on their behalf so that the right punishment happens if that's what is appropriate. And if they've been wrongfully charged, I need to do everything in my power to make sure that everyone understands that they've been wrongly charged. So it's a service that we provide, and there are some very, very skilled attorneys in our office. I am proud to associate with this office. I've been in this office for 14 years, and I think I might be around for a little longer. And if you have any questions, I'm available to answer any questions about our post-conviction or record clearing, if you have any.
Let me quickly ask Derek, thanks for coming. what can you tell people about how little or how much things have changed in terms of getting cases to trial, some of the timing and some of those kinds of issues with COVID? How has that changed? Is it still a moving target? If somebody has a case and an issue in a situation, they get arrested, God forbid, is their case going to get to trial as quickly as it would have if it was filed a year and a half, 2 years ago? Are we in the same place, or is it changing?
Not at this time. There is a backlog of cases from the past year and a half. Depending on which courthouse your case is in, the last numbers that I was given in Victorville, I think they're only doing one trial at a time. So there's 2 trial departments, I think, that are actively handling criminal cases right now, and they're alternating, so only one of those trials is going out at a time. I think Rancho is a little bit different. They've been getting some cases out, but it's not as fast as cases were going out prior to COVID. I think there's a change going into place on Monday where you're back to wearing a mask if you enter a courthouse. So throughout the county, starting Monday, everyone has to wear a mask, whether you are vaccinated or not. And so that's a change that was relaxed recently. But the calendars are still limited because of capacity. They're limited with the ability to actually have our clients in court, have public in court. So all of that has had an impact, and the jury panels, all of these things have been affected by COVID. So yeah, it's delayed. There's a tremendous backlog, and we thought that things were going to start moving because the move by California to loosen restrictions, but it appears that that's going to slow back down, starting with the changes coming up. Yes.
What did you decide to go into public defense? What were you doing before?
Well, as Joe mentioned, I'm a product of South Central Los Angeles. I grew up in inner cities. I've had interactions with law enforcement. I spent some time in the district attorney's office in San Francisco when I was in law school. I also had an opportunity to spend some time in the public defender's office while I was in law school, and the public defender's office was home for me. I mean, I felt it. I knew that the work called me, and so it was a natural transition to once I finished law school to go to a public defender's office.
What's that crackling?
Don't know. It's not this mic.
Any other questions?
Try that mic. It's not that mic. Might be that one sitting over there.
Okay. All right, Derek, my man, appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
So info is power, like we always say, sir. And some of us are many years out of school, and we're still trying to figure out what we want to do in the law. Derek, I can actually say with a lot of certainty, was that once he made up his mind he wanted to do criminal, that's what he wanted to do. That's why he's done it his whole career. I've been all over the place, but he's been very certain about what he wanted to do. Did you want to add something?
There was a question that was asked.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah, go ahead and address that.
So the question was, and you can clarify if I was.
Should we put him on another mic real fast?
I think that mic on that table.
Turn that one off. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. You're right. Sorry about that. Goes that one up. Yeah.
So I'm going to try to recite the question. I believe the question is, if a person was arrested in Los Angeles County, they've gone to prison, it's about time for them to parole, but family lives in San Bernardino County. Now, the way that parole works is you are paroled to the location of your last legal residence. So if the individual, if their residence was in San Bernardino County prior to the arrest, then they would be paroled to San Bernardino County, regardless of where the arrest took place. Now, if their last legal residence was in Los Angeles County, that's traditionally where they would be paroled. However, if that particular location no longer has family, or that person would not be able to survive, they could have a discussion with the parole board and say, my family and my support is going to be in San Bernardino County, can I be paroled to San Bernardino County? And they may do some research to see who that family is and what that means of support is going to be, so that they can make that adjustment and parole that person to that location where family is. And that's in Penal Code Section 3003. It covers the parole residency requirements.
Riverside County actually has on their website positions where they're felon-friendly. I mean, we have places in San Bernardino that we've worked with that will accept, but Riverside County actually has a place on their website for the city where they are, or maybe it's the county, where they are specifically felon-friendly and they're willing to go beyond a second chance.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that's something that we can do in San Bernardino. But the other thing is everybody's got to, it's not enough to vote. You've got to get a lot of people out registered to vote.
Sure. And so we had an event at the World Way Outreach Church a couple of months ago. And then that's one of the things that we did, is that we had someone there trying to get folks registered to vote. So that is something that's absolutely important. And I think, Joe, we did a podcast and I talked about voting and showing up for jury duty. So that's important, because if you're not.
8 years ago, one of my best friends, Gigi Hanna, ran for city clerk. She won originally by 2 votes. In a city of 225,000, she won by 2 votes. And that was with the former city attorney promoting the other gal. And we worked our asses off on that one. And
Nice.
it's, I mean, you know what? I should have a smaller butt than I do for how hard I work. It's voting, it's, people go, oh, I voted. I go, it's not enough to vote. You've got to go out and you've got to get a lot of people signed up and take them to the polls. Because this next election coming up next year, we could be in bankruptcy again in the city of San Bernardino. We're not that far off.
Big start.
It is. It's important.
Thank you, my friend.
And I'm a nag.
All right, so house cleaning to end. Those of you that have watched online or otherwise that RSVP'd, we have an email for you. We're going to get you resources. I will make sure that all of our speakers are CC'd, former and current. Linda was prominent in our speech before our last event. We'll make sure everybody has that information. This will be available as an on-demand product. People can get it, get the information. So link it, send it to people that need to see it. Folks that didn't catch us. Again, I want to thank the ECF family for really making us a home here and allowing us to do it. You know, when your tech guys aren't complaining and everything's in order, then you know it's really good. They're super professional. They put it together. Great job for ECF. Thank you guys for all of that helped us with that. Thanks, Pastor Begley. Thanks to everybody else that came out and attended, folks that watched, all our guests. And we will just see everybody soon. Info is power, so keep getting information so that we stay powerful. The day should be over where you're not able to find the information you need related to these issues. We are dedicated to keeping you out of that situation. So let's make sure that we do it and we go forward from there. All right? Thanks, everybody, for coming. Appreciate it.